Well, John, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in this session with Retail Connected. I've been really looking forward to our discussion. As chair of Tesco, the UK's largest retailer, one of the world's largest retailers, you are incredibly well placed to help us make sense of what's happening in the sector right now. So let's dive straight in. I'm sure everybody watching will have had highs and lows in the last year. I've certainly had highs and lows in the last year. And I'm really interested to hear what your high points and low points have been from the last year.
Well, thank you, Sally. I think the high point, there have been a number, but the main one has been just how incredibly well Tesco colleagues have responded to the challenge of keeping the business going, keeping the nation fed through all the changes that have had to take place over the course of the pandemic to protect customers and protect colleagues and so on. I think our team have done an amazing job, and I'm sure many other retailers have too. You know, we haven't been alone in doing that. So for me, I think that resilience, that ability to change has been a real high point. The low point, I think, has been the terrible toll of mortality that has come from the COVID epidemic. And as we've gone through the year, that's come closer to home. We've lost valued colleagues at Tesco, people that I know have succumbed to COVID. And I mean, that's been a dreadful experience for everyone, I think, concerned. So that's the real low point.
Yeah, totally understood. Couldn't agree more. And it's interesting you talked about the role that Tesco colleagues played and the role of the business. And when the pandemic struck, we saw so many examples of businesses really stepping up to help their customers, help their employees, help their communities, perhaps in a way that we haven't seen before. Do you think that the pandemic has reshaped the role of business in society in some way?
I think it's accelerated a change that was coming. I think many businesses were more and more aware that if they were going to prosper in the long term, they had to do more than just make money. They had to serve a big and complicated set of stakeholders well for long-term success. And I think the pandemic has accelerated that trend. It's brought more companies to that realization, and it's enabled people to demonstrate, I think, that they are very conscious of the responsibilities they have to all sorts of stakeholders. So the trend was there, but it's definitely been speeded up by the pandemic.
Tell us a bit more about Tesco's role in the pandemic and what the Tesco response was. You talked about it a little bit. It'd be great to hear a bit more.
Well, we had to clearly stay in business. Government made it very clear they expected supermarkets to stay open. People had to be able to eat. And that meant, the challenges of dealing with in the early stages, panic buying, ensuring that we kept our supply chain full so that people were able to get what they wanted in store, but also responding to a huge surge in demand for grocery home shopping because some people were told to shield at home. We actually had to find a way of dealing with that. So we doubled basically our capacity from about 750,000 deliveries a week to 1.5 million within a course of just a very small number of weeks. And what that meant, of course, was taking on a large number of extra colleagues, finding additional vehicles, training people, etc. So it was a huge effort. I think it was carried through very well by the business. Our competitors had similar, I think, challenges to meet. We weren't alone. But also then within the stores, we were working very hard to ensure that our colleagues were safe, installation of things like screens around checkouts, that we had social distancing within stores and limiting the numbers who come into stores so that we kept our customers as safe as we could as well. And all this had to happen while the business kept trading. We didn't have the luxury of being able to shut down for a few weeks to make this happen. This happened on the move. I've likened it really to, servicing a motor car, not while it's sitting in a garage, but while it's speeding down the motorway, having to kind of service while you're on the move. And I think that everyone concerned did a fantastic job of making that happen without missing a beat in terms of our ability to stay open.
Yeah, it must have been such an operationally intense period requiring huge levels of resilience, and we'll perhaps come on to that in a minute. But I just wanted to ask you as well about the decision that you made to repay the support that Tesco received from UK government, and then many others followed suit. you're chairing Tesco, but you've also been the president of the Confederation of British Industry. And I'm curious to know how you see the relationship between retail and government now, and how it might evolve over time.
Yeah, well, look, if I deal first of all with the repayment of business rates, the government made a decision to exempt all retail from business rates for the year that's just finished. It's now been extended. And we were grateful for that. We didn't know what was going to happen to trading, what costs we were going to incur. But as the year went on, it became clear that, our ability to continue to trade relatively profitably was not threatened by the pandemic. And we felt increasingly that we should repay this money. We shouldn't keep it. There were many, many other calls on the government funds, other more deserving cases, people who needed help more than us. So we decided as a board in the early autumn to do so, and we announced the repayment of £585 million of business rates relief that we'd received. We've also now made it very clear we won't take business rates relief in the year that is just about to start, the new government financial year starting 5th of April, and so on. And I think that was the right thing to do. I think the demands upon government have been immense through the furlough scheme, which has saved many hundreds of thousands of people from unemployment. And I think it's only right that those who are able to afford to manage without government help should put their hands up and do so.
And in terms of the role of retail and government and the relationship between the two, is there a new way that should work, or how do you see that evolving?
Well, I'd like to see it evolve. I mean, it's very early days. I chair a thing called the Covert Recovery Commission, which is a bunch of businesses that have got together to try to create a long-term growth plan, because there is no doubt that the pandemic has damaged our economy. We've lost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably of jobs. Particularly, I think retailers are conscious of the carnage really on the high street created by the pandemic. Accelerated a change that might have taken place over perhaps 5 or 10 years has taken place over 5 to 10 months. And we've got to create new jobs to compensate for that. So what we are coming up with, and we will publish our report in about a month's time, is a plan that would involve business and government working together. We don't think it's just about asking government to write a series of large checks. We think business has to put its best foot forward as well, and that perhaps together we can find ways of restarting growth in the UK economy and creating the employment that we desperately need, not just for those who've been displaced by the changes of the pandemic, but the young people who are coming into the workforce, older people who need to retrain, and so on.
Thank you. So we've talked about the role of business in society. Let's talk a bit about the role of the board. What do you see as the most important responsibility of the board right now? And has it changed?
No, I don't think it really has changed. I mean, I think boards have got 3 key responsibilities. First of all, to ensure that the business has a very clear purpose, which is well understood, because a clear purpose is going to lead to, I think, a good culture within the business. Secondly, that there is a strategy to get to wherever it is the company wants to get to. And I think that strategy is going to be created almost always by management, not by the board, but the board has a vital role in reviewing it, challenging it, signing off on it, helping put it in place. And finally, and I put it last, but it may actually be most important of all, ensuring that we've got a really great management team in place who are capable of steering the business forward, taking it forward, providing the sort of leadership that I think modern businesses need. And I think, if boards do those 3 things, then they can feel they've acquitted themselves reasonably well.
Mm. Well, obviously at Spencer Stuart, we're going to agree with you that great leadership is essential. What do you think are the most important skills that boards are looking for in retail leaders right now?
Yeah, I think they've probably changed a little, but not very much. The old style model of leadership, which was very hierarchical, somebody sat at the top of a very steep pyramid and issued a string of orders of the day, and people down the line, passed them on and ensured they were executed, which is the way some retailers used to operate. I think no longer works in this modern world. You know, one can now communicate at all levels. I think the key challenge for a leader nowadays is really to create followers. You know, somebody said, you know, if you don't have followers, you can't be a leader. And therefore, I think leadership is by example, it's by communication, it's by engaging with people. And retail is a great place actually to learn and acquire those skills, which is why I'm very confident that the retail sector will continue to produce great leaders. You know, I look around Tesco, and for me, one of the most sort of heartwarming things is I see at every level fantastic people who are clearly going to take on bigger and bigger roles as we go forward, and have got that ability to, you know, engage people, to create followership, to communicate very clearly. You know, those are the sorts of things we needed. It's no longer about issuing orders. I think it's about inspiring people to follow you.
Yeah, it's such a great summary. Thank you. Another of the key responsibilities of the board is to ensure that you're balancing the needs of all your different stakeholders. Can you tell us a little bit about how that might have evolved in any way, and what the key activities have been there?
Yeah, I think for a supermarket chain like Tesco, it's actually quite a complex set of stakeholders we have to manage. I mean, it's glaringly obvious if we don't look after our customers, we won't prosper. And if we don't look after our colleagues, you know, we won't prosper either. Those two are absolute givens. But in addition to that, if we just look within the UK, Tesco is represented in 2,800 communities. So we have a sense of responsibility towards communities. What can we do to support the local communities we operate in? We have many suppliers, they're important. We have relationships with governments, devolved governments, local authorities, and out with, you know, the UK, we have international supply chains, and we feel a sense of responsibility to ensure that the products we source are raised in an appropriate way. You know, agriculture is not destroying, not leading to deforestation. The products that we buy, if they're manufactured from something like palm oil, it's sustainable palm oil. We're not contributing to loss of biodiversity around the world. The people who operate in our supply chains are being fairly remunerated and properly looked after. So managing those responsibilities in faraway places is actually quite difficult. And we have to be realistic about the amount of influence we have. You know, if we write to President Bolsonaro, as we have, telling him to stop deforestation in the Amazon, we know he's not going to quake in his boots just because he's had a letter from Tesco. But if more and more retailers do it, the cumulative impact we can have working together is much greater. And of course, if we stop buying Brazilian beef, as Tesco has done, that sends a message to the beef producers, and it may be that they can exercise more influence on President Bolsonaro than we can. So it's more diffuse, it's more difficult, it's more long-term. But I think, you know, reaching back into the supply chain to try to raise standards in that supply chain is probably the most difficult thing we do, but it's just as important, I think, as the other closer to home stakeholders that we have to look after.
And you talk about some things that have perhaps gained importance. Do you think that the pandemic has changed what the board is prioritizing, even if the role of the board hasn't particularly changed?
I don't think it's because of the pandemic, but there is this increasing interest in sustainability, on reaching towards net zero. Tesco is committed to get to net zero with its UK operations by 2035. Investors, there is a wall of money seeking to invest in socially responsible investments. So our investors are more and more conscious of that. So I think we're spending more time thinking about about sustainability, our environmental credentials, and everything else. We're having to spend more time, I think, thinking about how we develop the managers of the future we need. So the board takes an interest in that. It's a very broad technical and technological innovation, digitization. How is that going to impact on our business? And I'm lucky enough to have a very talented, very diverse board who've got expertise in all of these sorts of topics. And I think together, someone else I once worked for said, you know, all of us know more than any of us. And I think the kind of cumulative power of having a board with a great deal of expertise is awesome, frankly. And that's something that we, you know, every board should strive to get to.
Yeah. And we've talked about the importance of resilience, and obviously had this incredibly tough year, and we're all hoping that the vaccine will bring light at the end of the tunnel. Can you give the people who are watching this today reasons to be optimistic for the future and a sense of what you see as the big opportunities in retail right now?
Yeah, I think people should be optimistic. First of all, there is light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the government's roadmap to get out of this. I think the very good progress of the vaccination program means it's likely we'll be able to, probably won't improve on that roadmap, but we should at least be able to meet it. So people are going to be able to get out and socialize, and that will be very good news for the, you know, all the retailers who've been closed down, for example, all the hospitality businesses who've been unable to trade or trade effectively through this period. So I think the short term we will see a rebound in the UK economy. Then what we've got to do, I think, is do the things that are necessary to ensure we've got long-term recovery as well, which I talked about earlier. You know, investing in the sectors and businesses that have got a real future, creating global leadership for the UK in some sectors, creating employment, training, you know, ensuring that net zero is not just something that we do in the UK, but we develop so much expertise that we can actually export that expertise that we have created to the rest of the world. So I think it's an exciting set of future prospects, but it's going to need active, I think, intervention, not just by business, but also by government to make it happen. But I think retail will continue to be, I think, a great place for people to practice their careers. You know, I think it's one of the few sectors where you can get on as much really as you're able, as you want to, as you're motivated to do, regardless of your background, regardless of your degree of education. I sometimes refer to Tesco as a kind of factory for social mobility. My colleagues don't always like that, but I think it's one of our huge strengths is the diversity of people that we attract to join us in the first place, and we then create opportunities to get on, you know. And I think retail can do that in a way that most other industries really struggle.
Well, you paint an exciting picture for the future, and it sounds like you would still recommend a career in retail.
Absolutely. You know, I think it's one of I was a delivery boy for a local grocery retailer in Scotland when I was 12. So I started very young. I found my way back into food retail. And, you know, funnily enough, people are now going out on bikes to do home delivery. So it feels like it's almost gone full circle, Sally. But no, I think it's a great industry, and it will take different forms, but it will continue to be a very important part of our economy, our employment base, and create great opportunities for people.
And last question, but an important one. What are you most looking forward to doing when travel and socializing is possible again?
Well, look, I could spend the next 20 minutes talking about that, but if I really think hard, I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is being able to see our children, our grandchildren, meet up with friends, go out for a meal. It's very sort of simple stuff. You know, it's not exotic travel. That'll come later. But I think just resuming social contact with the people that matter to you is going to be the biggest, you know, immediate payoff. And I just can't wait to be able to do that.
Oh, well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. And I really hope that you get to hug your children and your grandchildren soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.